Almost 70% of Australian companies identify China as the top market or one of the top 3 markets internationally for their business. I think it's a good time to not only reflect on the success, but also on how that can be used as a platform for the next stage of collaboration between China and Australia. In 2015, bilateral trade volume was almost 145 billion Australian dollars. And this year, it's forecast to be 325 billion, which is a almost 125% increase, which has grown at a rate that's significantly faster than how Australia's trade has grown with other trading partners around the world. It's provided, obviously, tariff relief and market access and increased the resilience of the trade between Australia and China. On the anniversary of the 10th, I was here when we celebrated, that's how old I am. I was here in Beijing when the then minister was up here engaging with the community and celebrating this milestone as one of the first comprehensive free trade agreements with a developed economy. So on the anniversary, the 10th anniversary, I think it's a good time to not only reflect on the success, but also on how that can be used as a platform for the next stage of collaboration between China and Australia in industries that are future-focused and align with the strategic priorities in both countries. The easing of the trade restrictions or the removal of the impediments and the improvement in the bilateral relationship give an injection of confidence to business. In the sectors that were affected by the trade impediments, we've seen strong rebound, including in wine specifically, and in agriculture more broadly. The demand for Australian product remains solid because of the reputation for quality and safety. Of course, we're not immune from the backdrop of global commodity prices and softening demand in China for some of what Australia exports. But overall, it's healthy. The US-China trade tensions are impacting exports from Australia, obviously. In the case of some products, Chinese buyers looking to source alternative suppliers are looking to Australia, particularly in the agriculture sector, because of Australia's reputation for good quality, safe food and agriculture products. Our report highlights new areas of opportunity in export beyond the traditional areas of cooperation, including critical minerals, clean energy technologies, LNG, biopharmaceuticals, and medical devices, all of which align with both countries' priorities. A particular noticeable shift is the emergence of opportunities for Australian companies to invest in agribusiness, clean energy, and F&B in China, which is a really interesting development. And there was, as you know, our report surveyed Australian companies as well as Chinese companies. And both sides saw opportunities in those areas, which is a new trend and signals a deeper level of engagement beyond exporting, creating value together in the China market. I think the outlook is positive. I was in Shanghai recently for SIAL. I spent an awful lot of time in the meat pavilion, where I think Australia producers are working to keep up with demand for quality Australian red meat. We've also had the approval of, I think it's 15 new production facilities for lamb. And I also met with producers of goat meat. So I think it's important for the companies to stay connected with the market, to adapt to consumer trends, to fully use e-commerce, to take advantage of the advanced cold supply chains in place. But it's unrealistic to expect that Australian producers will be insulated from the broader impact on consumer demand, and they need to respond to that appropriately. If you look at wine, for example, I believe that the export value is up at quite a high level, but the volume is down. So that reflects premiumization of consumption of wine and the trend in the domestic market. So this is something that Australian exporters and producers need to adapt to. And but overall, for the reasons you just said, I'm quite optimistic about the underlying demand and the commitment of Australian producers to meet that demand. So the US tariff policies are creating disruption to global trade. They're increasing cost, increasing uncertainty, and impacting supply. So it's not something that Australian companies would like to see. Looking through the impact specifically, Australian exporters are impacted by the tariffs on their exports to US. In terms of the China market, as I mentioned before, there are opportunities for Australian suppliers to potentially step up and meet some of the demand that is displaced as a result of the retaliatory tariffs. At the same time that they have to consider what the impact might be in third country markets where they compete with US supply. So you have US supply displaced from the China market. Maybe that goes with increased intensity into other markets like Japan, where Australian producers and exporters compete. So it's quite a complex disruption to trade flows, and it's certainly not something that Australian companies would like to see. But the reality is that they need to be agile. And one of the ways, again, talked about in our report, that they're responding is deepening partnerships locally in country to better understand and respond to emerging opportunities and new regulatory approaches. I'm very optimistic about the medium and long-term outlook because of the underlying complementarity of the economies. In terms of the report that we're launching today, almost 70% of companies identify China as the top market or one of the top 3 markets internationally for their business. So the results of the survey speak loudly to the commitment that Australian companies have, notwithstanding the complexities and uncertainties in the international environment. The report highlights several sectors where Australia and China's are strongly aligned. First is agriculture and food and beverage. They're a key strength of Australia, underpinned by Australia's reputation for safety, quality and reliability. But as I mentioned, there's interest in Australian companies investing in China in areas like ag tech, supply chain innovation and local production partnerships aimed at better meeting that evolving consumer demand, but also given the food security goals. So that's one area. The second area is clean energy. It's a standout priority. Both Chinese firms and foreign firms rank it among the top sectors for two-way trade, investment and collaboration. There's real opportunity for joint work together on green hydrogen, renewable energy technologies and energy storage, where Australia's resources and innovation can combine with China's manufacturing and technology advantages. So that's clean energy. And then the third area that I'd highlight that's in the report is biopharmaceuticals and medical devices. There's real scope. One of our board members is from such a medtech innovation firm. A real scope for that innovation to meet China's evolving, Chinese consumers' evolving needs and expectations in that area. So this is emblematic of a shift from a traditional commodities-based trading relationship to one that's more strategic and driven by innovation and complementarity in the economies. Renewable energy, electric vehicle supply value chain, and the battery value chain as well. I think they're areas that the complementarity and the need and the ability for China to supply exists. I'll give you an example. Last year at the CCPIT annual trade and investment event, I said Australia welcomes Chinese electric vehicles because we don't have a domestic car manufacturing capability and the consumers are looking for functional, good value for money, affordable solutions. And that's seen now a year later when Chinese EVs are achieving good results. When I was back at Christmas at the end of last year, a number of my friends said, oh, we're going to buy and I won't use the company's name, but we're going to go and trade in our car and buy a Chinese EV. So I think that that's an area where there's opportunity in that surrounding value chain for collaboration between Australia and China. Of course, Australia's, the Albanese government announced the Future Made in Australia initiative. And so prospective Chinese investors would look at opportunities to align their investment proposals in the renewable value chain in ways that are responding to the desire to have local production, the desire to increase sovereign capability, and the desire to create jobs in the new economy. I think this is a trend now that we're seeing around the world, but certainly in Australia, there's a need and a receptiveness towards that type of collaboration. So as I mentioned, the report gives quite a strong picture of renewed confidence and also a bit strategic recalibration of Australian companies towards their China business. Nearly 70% of the foreign firms chose China as their top or one of their top 3 global investment destinations. And that's, as you'll hear in a moment, is backed by performance. So in 2024, so last year, 75% reported profitability, up from 58% the year before. 51%, so over half, recorded year-on-year growth, and 46% talked about increased investment compared to the prior year. So that is the reason why, or one of the reasons why, Australian firms are cautiously optimistic about the prospects in the China market. Another interesting finding, though, from the report is how they're changing their strategy of engagement with the China market. And there's three interesting findings. One is building local partnerships. So this is important to understand policy trends, to respond and adapt quicker to evolving policy trends or consumer demand, and to make their business model more locally relevant. So that's local partnerships. The second one, which you asked about, is geographic expansion. So 1/3 of firms plan to expand in new cities and regions over the next 3 years. So beyond Beijing and Shanghai, the next 4 areas are Shenzhen, Hangzhou, Chengdu, and Hainan. So obviously reflecting the attraction of the different policies and cost advantages in those regions. So that's geographic expansion. And the last finding about the recalibration of Australian companies' approach to the market is investment in the government affairs teams. So there's growing recognition that long-term success here in the China market depends on constructive engagement with the government and regulators to be able to navigate policy shifts and ensure that your business is aligned with China's policy needs.